Tell us a little bit about your attitude actually for a second. I do want to dive into that because one of the things I really appreciate about you is that you're positive. You have a problem solving mindset. It's like, even I've seen you go through some situations where like they could have been construed as negative. You could have gotten down about them. Things didn't turn out exactly right. And that's just business. That's just life. And I've kind of we've known each other for over a year now. So I kind of seen you walk through a couple of situations and it feels like you're always coming up with, nope, this is how I'm going to move forward. This is what's next. This is how it's going to help me. This is how did you get like that? And what advice do you have for people who are not like that? Or do people need to be like that? Is that a positive thing? Is that a good thing? Or is it better to be pessimistic? And I'm curious your thoughts, honestly.
Such a good question. And I could probably talk, I could probably talk on this for a year. No, I was definitely not always like this, not even close. In fact, growing up, I was, excuse my French, but I was a total shithead. I was a really good athlete, grew up in the Northeast, hardworking, blue collar, I was an athlete, but I was a really good athlete and I was just a jerk. My parents did the best job they could. They taught me how to work hard, but I didn't have the best moral compass back then. I was not a good dude. I knew I was a good dude inside. I didn't know how to act. I was smart. I did well in school, but I didn't really try very hard. I got a scholarship, to go to college. And quite honestly, what's funny is literally my freshman year in college, I didn't have my license because I had just gotten arrested for producing fake IDs and I lost my license, all that, And I got to go into college. I didn't have my car, and I was like, sweet, I don't need my car. I'm going to college, and I didn't have a license for the first, 60 days. But going into college, and then getting out of college and in Connecticut and moving to California, my brother had already been out there, and I moved to California. And quite honestly, I had learned my programming from my family's work hard, and we also had a very bad idea about money, I grew up with a very bad, hey, if you have money, you took advantage of somebody that works hard, right? So there was and I was programmed that way, this manager, this boss, they're against me. I work hard and I got fired because them, it was very you don't need that car. You're just a show off if you look. And I loved cars when I was a kid, Porsches, Lamborghinis, Ferrari Testarossa back in the Miami Vice days, starting to date myself. But it was I loved cars. And I remember looking at a car and my dad was like, does that impress you? And I was like, yes, yes, I thought. So it was ingrained that, that show offy. So it wasn't a coincidence. My whole life I had pieces of crap cars and I worked multiple jobs because that I looked at yeah, you're a man if you do that. And it really wasn't until I moved to California and my brother came home one weekend from a seminar he had done. And he's like, hey, and my brother's not the most lovey-dovey. He's like, hey, man, I was at a seminar this weekend and, I had my graduation and we lived together, mind you. This is how disconnected I was as a person and how much I cared about only myself. We lived together and he had been gone from Thursday until Sunday and I didn't even know he was gone. And he came back. He's like, hey, man, I want you to do this seminar, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what seminar? He's like, the one I've been at all weekend. I was like, you were gone this weekend? Long story short, I go down, I do this seminar, and it was just one of those punches in my face. It was a personal growth seminar that kind of it was ooh, awareness. And it just
was that Landmark?
It was PSI, which is Landmark based. It was the same people started Landmark, started PSI, all comes from, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. And so same thing, the basic seminar, Landmark, it's all by the same people. So it was the same exact thing.
Total side note, but have you told Fatih that you went to that?
No.
He is super into that. And just so everybody listening, Fatih is the CEO and founder of Vibe Living, which largest co-living company in San Francisco. You got to mention that to him, and you got to mention that to him. You got to. But anyway, keep going.
So I did that, and it was that punch in my face. It was oh my God. It was the awareness. Now, mind you, the awareness doesn't change you. The awareness is the awareness. So if you take the awareness and you realize, wow, I'm kind of a shithead and I have a lot of negative beliefs about myself, and then don't do anything about it, nothing's going to change. You had a good weekend. And really that's what I did for 6 months. I was like, oh, I'm good. I'm changed. And within a week, you're back to your old habits because your programming is something that's in you for your whole life. Some people are afraid of the water because they almost drowned when they were little, and that's 40 years or 50 years. That's a hard program, right? So I had bad money programs and I had bad people programs, relationships. So it was hard to break. And then 6 months went by, I got invited to a free follow up, and I ended up doing a 90-day program. It was like an advanced program. And that was really the implementation of everything that I was learning. And in those 90, it was the hardest 90 days. You're held accountable on a daily basis for 90 days to your goals, to your word, how you are with your word. And I sucked for those 90 days, but boy, did I learn about me. And over time, it got me on the personal growth path. And at the same time, I met some people, not a coincidence, who were in a network marketing company, but it was through financial services. And I had started, so I was I got into that, started to get around different people, started reading business books, started reading personal growth books. I still remember reading Think and Grow Rich the first time. I read it and I was like, I'm not ready for this. This is too much for me. My brain is not, I'm not in that place. And so it started me on this path of personal growth and investing in myself. And and I say investing in myself, it was so hard to come up. And I remember the first big program was $3,000. And I had so many people around me that saw the good in me. And of course I didn't, like most people, right? When you have that friend, they're awesome. And you see that the only thing that's getting in their way is their own limited self-belief or their own negative belief about themselves or whatever story they bought from their family or mom or dad or whoever told them they weren't good enough. So I knew I was good. I knew I had good qualities, but I didn't see it. And overcoming these money things really hard. And I remember finally committing to going to this program that was $3,000, which is crazy back then because $3,000 was so much and $3,000 now is nothing. But $3,000 was and so I call her up. I ask her for the money. Borrowing money was a big deal too because you didn't earn it. You didn't blah, 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 same stuff. And after I'm sweating, I still remember that it's still a visceral conversation. I was like, hey, I'm going to this advanced program. And she was in the program. She had done it. She's like, yes. And I was like, I need to borrow some money. She's like, okay, how much? And I was like, all of it. She's like, okay. And I was like, throwing up inside because it was so hard, one, for me to ask for money because I didn't value, one, me, and I didn't value her wanting to help me. And so that moment was a breakthrough moment where I was like, okay. And she's like, and then of course she rubbed it in afterwards. She's like, oh, and by the way, she was about goddamn time you asked. And it was just like that punch. And that was the thing that changed everything. I started doing personal growth seminars. And then later on, so that was probably 2003, after a leadership seminar where I wrote out the woman of my dreams when I was out by myself in the woods, just so happened to be the month my wife left her job in the city of La Mirada. And 3 months later, we met in Pasadena. And she was exactly what I wrote. There's all kinds of manifestation stuff that has happened since. And then, through business, then I got involved in Mentor, got into a mastermind, and, now the rest is history. So it was I was always, it's a good question because you asked if I was always positive. I would say I was never negative, but I was always complaining or making fun of things. And it wasn't until all that personal growth where it was I was taught to take responsibility. I had a very victim mindset. And that's the problem, I think, with the country right now and just people is we have become, not everybody, but I mean, we have this victim mindset. It's everybody else's fault. I've been coaching sports for years and it's never the kid's fault. It's the coach's fault. And now schools, it's not the teacher's, it's not the kid's fault. It's the teacher's fault, and it's not the right's fault. It's the left's fault. It's not the left's fault. It's the right. It's everybody else. And no one takes responsibility. And I learned that if I can, once you take responsibility for everything in your life, all the decisions, which kind of sucks because now you have to be you know what? I'm not doing that great, or I've done a lot of dumb things. Well, the cool thing is well, if I'm responsible, that means I have 100% control. So I just started practicing with little things, and so I was there's nothing I can do about that. So why worry? Why stress? Why Why focus on that? And what's funny is you said we went through a lot, and in 2019, Joe got diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was one of those like,
Joe's your wife.
Okay, let's go. My wife, Joe got breast cancer. And it wasn't one of those like, oh, woe is us, or blah, blah. It's like, okay, there's nothing positive ever comes out of stressing. Nothing positive ever comes out of like worrying. It only makes everything worse and the people around you feel worse. So it's like what's it? I'm getting older. We got 4 kids. I've got very limited energy. Right? I need as much energy as possible, and I need to focus on the things that are good. So it's like we got the news, and we're like, all right, what's next? Let's go. And we didn't want to think about all the alternatives because it's so easy to think about all the bad things that could happen. So, and when you stay focused on the positive, what happens is it minimizes the negative. And then because you're focusing on the positive, the way the brain works is you attract more positive into your life, which is why people talk about gratitude journals and things like that. But the more grateful you are and the more positive you are, people want to be around you, and you attract more positive things. And you can call it God, and you can call it energy. And now we've become a lot more spiritual in the past, literally 5 to 7 years, where now it's no longer we're just like, we're being guided, and we're meeting incredible people, and we just have faith that all of those things are happening for our good. And I also believe that like we went through all that crap so that we could meet these people, right? Like my idea, and that it goes with Fatih too, and you, it's like, I didn't care about being a part of a big company. I told him, I was like, I'm looking for partners in life. Like I want to do business with good people and partners that are doing bigger things than me, So did it always? No. I mean, I would say now, I think it's my superpower now, like to look at things in a positive way, because I don't have the time or the energy to waste. Even if like it's a car accident, I've had a bunch, and it's, if you can switch and literally look for the positive and everything, nothing is bad. And that's including tragedy, right? Like she had breast cancer and she had to get a bilateral mastectomy. It's like, that's terrible. Or it's a boob job paid for by insurance. It depends on how you look at it, and it's like, if, so we were really blessed because they found it early, and the same thing, we found it early, and we were able to get rid of it, and she's 100% cancer free. Not everybody is, and not everybody, it doesn't turn out that way. Not everybody does, but those people, and this is for everyone, the worse your life is, the harder it is, the more obstacles to overcome, the more inspiring your story is. Like if I never had it rough in business, like there's no inspiration. It's like, hey, I started out I started with my parents bought me a house, and then I grew that and scaled it, and now I'm a multimillionaire. That relates to like 0.001% of people in the world. But it's like, hey, I was this, and I was a jerk, and I struggled, and I had no money, and I was broke, and I did drugs, or I did alcohol, or I abused, or I did all these things, and then I hit rock bottom, and then I failed, and I went bankrupt, and I had all these terrible things happen. But here's how I got out of it. There's so much more you can relate to with that. And so when you have awful things happen to you, terrible things, death and disease and tragedy and all that stuff, like all it does is build up your success story, your victory story, to inspire more, right? Like those obese people in fitness, like big deal. Like my word didn't go very far. Oh, you're an athlete your whole life. You've never been overweight, never been obese. I'm trying to tell you, just eat less and move more, to somebody where fitness has never been a part of their life, and food was love and affection and all that stuff. You have no idea. So you hold no weight. But if I was like obese and I struggled and I lost it and gained it back, and I had trauma and I had all these things that most people have in their lives, and that's what happens because of it, and then I still overcame it, those people will, they'll listen. They're like, yes, and they'll be inspired. So the worse your story, the more inspiring it is. I just look back at what we kind of overcome, and it's just kind of like, well, that's all we know. We just know how to overcome. So when other people are like, you're so inspiring, it's like, it's weird to me because I'm just trying to I'm just trying to be better. I'm just trying to be positive. I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to be around people I like. So I would say to those people, like, if you're struggling and if it's bad and you've had trauma and you've had, bankruptcies, or you're broke, and I was broker than broke, like, pulling pennies out of the couches to pay for gas, like, just not cool. If you can stay positive, put time and energy into your personal growth. It doesn't have to be money, reading, personal growth. And now with podcasts and stuff, everything's free. You can absolutely change everything and be a way bigger inspiration to anybody else because you've been through so much.